Thank you all for being back in the room. It was really interesting to see already the high interest of the different attendees and the potential involvement of Earth observation in the policy, because this is exactly what we are going to talk about in this second session with two panels. You may know that Earth created a working group called the Green Deal Working Group several years ago. And we defined three priorities. First, methane and carbon. For this specific session, we decided to choose two items linked to the current and the upcoming frameworks. And the first one for the carbon removal certification framework, and the second one for the Deforestation-Free Product Regulation. The Green Deal Working Group has been really a game changer, I would say, in the association, stimulating the interest of a lot of members and really supporting the interaction between ERSC and institutions, but as well user community. So it's my pleasure today to invite Mathieu Mal, Policy Officer for Agriculture and Climate at the European Environmental Bureau, to moderate this session. In his role at the European Environmental Bureau, Europe's largest network of environmental citizens organizations, Mathieu Mal focused on European policy on the intersection of climate and agriculture. Based in Brussels, he engaged with policymakers, politicians, civil society organizations, and other stakeholders at the EU and member state level. He leads in the formulation of the EEB policy and strategy on agriculture and climate, coordinates the policy work in a European research project on carbon farming, and is a member of the European Commission Expert Group on Carbon Removal. Previously, Mathieu worked on land-based climate change mitigation at the Stockholm Environment Institute. Mathieu, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the nice introduction, and also thanks to all of you to come back to your seats after the coffee break. I'm happy to see that a panel on EU climate policy can bring people back to their seats. It's great to see. The EU is committed to being climate neutral by 2050, which means that we need to drastically and very fast reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases even faster than we are doing today. But even if we do this as well as we can, as well as we manage, it means that in 2050 we still will have some amount of greenhouse gas emissions, which hopefully by then we'll be talking about residual emissions, those that are really, really hard, even impossible to abate. If we want even to go a step further than that and go to negative emissions to make sure that we can reduce the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, it means we have to look at carbon removals, the removal of CO2 from our atmosphere. And the European Commission has recently created a new framework to govern carbon removals in the EU. It's called the Carbon Removal Certification Framework, CRCF, just rolls off the tongue. And this framework divides carbon removals into three main categories. The first one is the ecosystem or nature-based carbon removals. In this regulation, they're called carbon farming. And so those are rather temporary ways of storing carbon in our land sinks. Think of practices like agroforestry, cover cropping, no-till agriculture, those kind of removals. The second category is the storage of CO2 in products, where we want to look at a bit longer timelines of a couple of decades. Think, for example, of wooden building materials. The third category is called the permanent removals. Unsurprisingly, they're supposed to be permanent. Think of industrial applications like direct air capture and storage. So those are the three big categories under this framework that are being regulated and for which the framework sets guidelines. Now, that's a framework, and right now what the Commission is doing with help of an expert group on removals is to develop methodologies for each of these individual practices. What are the exact ways that these removals will be monitored and reported and verified and certified? And we will be in the discussion that is to start in just a bit. We'll be talking mostly about the carbon farming pillar, so the sequestration of carbon in land use. And specifically in this specific sector, the question of how to monitor, how to verify, data reliance, accuracy, is still a very, very big topic that is heavily, or let's say, there's a lively discussion around that among stakeholders. So it will be very nice to go a bit deeper into that and also see the role that Earth observation could play in that. And I'll be in very good company to talk about this topic with a very complementary panel. So I'd like to welcome to the stage our three panelists. Christian Holzleitner is the head of unit for the land economy and carbon removals unit at DG Klima, the Commission Department for Climate Action. And this is also the unit that is responsible for leading on the CRCF and the methodology. So welcome, Christian. Thanks for joining. Next, Antonella Sucuro is a scientist and entrepreneur. She has 15 years of experience working with AI, also big data and process-based models. Right now, she is the co-founder and chief technical officer of Kinsoil, which is a European startup that specializes in supporting climate action and enabling the agri-food sector to effectively meet sustainability and soil regeneration goals. They do that through carbon emissions insetting, which means that companies are able to reduce the carbon footprint within their own value chains. And they do that with evidence-based MRV solutions. And then last but not least, I would like to welcome David Gazdag, who is the regional representative for Europe at Verra. But before joining Verra, David had already 2 decades of global climate market experience covering project and policy development, validation, and verification. So yes, with that, I think I will move over there and we can have a discussion. All right. Christian, welcome and thanks again for joining. I was wondering if I could maybe start with you and ask you from the broad policy level. I've tried to introduce very briefly what the CRCF is about. Thinking of that policy environment that we have now and also the methodologies that are under development, how do you see the potential role of Earth observations in the field of carbon removals?
Hi, good morning. Thanks a lot for having me. Happy to be here because we believe that Earth observation is key if we want to set better incentives for farmers and foresters to change to more sustainable agriculture. So with the certification framework, we really want to create a market for you, to create a market for Earth observation, that we get that started. If we want to be successful here, we need cost-efficient monitoring tools. And we are convinced that Earth observation has the potential there. And we are very keen to develop that. So in the methodologies that we develop, like for example, for agriculture, including both soil carbon, but also above ground biomass, so agroforestry, rewetting of peatlands, is that we can really test and scale up the application of Earth observation. So yeah, very much looking forward even more to, we are already in close contact with the expert group, but that we can do this even more over the next months. But it's not only the carbon removal certification that we're looking at. It's also the soil monitoring law, the forest monitoring law that we are currently discussing with the co-legislators. We really have this vision that we come to a unique information system on nature, on climate, on biodiversity for the whole of Europe, that we can create this map. Like the carbon removal certification has the obligation for us to develop a registry by 2028, an EU-wide registry. And I would think this registry should be geographically explicit so that you see if you buy a carbon credit, if you buy an emission reduction, maybe in the future a biodiversity credit, that you exactly know from where it comes, so that we really can avoid a double counting and so on. But that this information system in the future is really bottom up, how we can then also have our national inventories on land use change and forestry, LULUCF. Not anymore top down, but really that we go on tier 3 level and can build it up from the individual parcels that we have, and that we can integrate that with what we have under the land parcel identification system in the CAP, and we come to a unique information system that can serve both public policy needs, but also like the reporting in the value chain. Like all the big food processors are interested in getting better in reporting their scope 3 emissions. And this is equally true for the bigger biomass processors, be it bioenergy or be it someone like IKEA. So I would really hope that we can build here something that conserve all these purposes and where we are efficient. And I think that can be really something, although when we talk, and the next commission will talk a lot about the competitiveness of the European industry, but I think that can really be an infrastructure that can make us more competitive in the bioeconomy.
Thank you very much. David, if I may move on to you, from Vera's point of view, or maybe from your sector's point of view, let's say, to keep it a bit more broadly, how do you see the role of Earth observation when it comes to the improvement of carbon removals?
Yeah. Good morning, and thank you for having me. It's wonderful. So Vera is a standard setting organization. We are the largest in the voluntary carbon market globally. It is an NGO. It's based in the US, but very active in Europe, in both European-based project developers, and also recently we started to do projects in Europe. When we are talking about Earth observation, there is two things that we have already our methodologies, something that you can check out on our website, how they actually work. And when we do a project, there is two main parts. One is the baseline, what would happen without the project, and the other one is what the project is actually doing. And in Earth observation, we need Earth observation for both, especially with our recent VM47 methodology, when you have an area that is monitored, and it's a comparable area to the project area, and we have to monitor both, or the project developer had to monitor both. To monitor the actual project area may be needed more certain measurements, but to monitor the baseline area, for that Earth observation is perfect.
Thank you very much. I think also in the CRCF, when we look at the regulation text, the methodology is still under construction. But if you look at the regulation text, it also mentions this combination of different methods and technologies, right? So I believe soil sampling is there, in situ monitoring is there, but to be combined, I think it's mandatory to be combined with another option as well, which could be modeling, which could be Earth observation. I don't know if you want to comment on that detail.
The co-legislators, Parliament members, they were quite explicit about that in the tasks that we now have to do. It's to find the optimal combination between in situ monitoring, modeling, and remote sensing. And this will be now one of the challenges, how we implement that in the different methodologies. So, and of course, again, your input is most welcome. And I think it's something that where I hope we will also be able to give enough space for innovation. So we'll do the first methodology, that may be valid until 2030 or 5 years or something on, and then we can learn a lot and improve further. But I think in the beginning we will, of course, also still rely a lot on modeling. We see the farmer does this, this, and this, which can then also be checked by Earth observation, as you said before, the cover cropping, the rotation, and then we'll still use a model. But the more, of course, we can go to result-based, the better, because the less we have rules for what the farmer can do or should not do. And there, of course, I would hope that we, over the next years, can progress a lot, gain a lot of experience, how we can do that, such that not the one who knows what best to do is the individual farmer. What we are always bad in Brussels is if we want to tell someone what to do, because Europe is so different. So, and that will be a bit, I think the key challenge for us in developing these methodologies. How do we get the right level of the standard? Like, okay, what is, for example, the rules on uncertainty that we should put of the different monitoring methodologies that we have, so that we create the robustness and the trust that we need in the system, but still give enough flexibility for the certification schemes and so on, to also innovate and to push like the application of Earth observation a little bit further.
Thank you. Antonella, over to you. So your company is an Earth observation service provider, you could say, and you work on the agri-food industry. So how does Earth observation come in to play at your company, the services you provide to implement carbon farming?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks also from my side for the invitation to speak here. Yeah, so we are Earth observation users, so we use Earth observation data to build our products. And how Earth observation can be used in the context of agriculture, sustainable agriculture, carbon removals. This has been touched already, also in combination with modeling. You need ground truth data for building the models. But there are a lot of applications that are also explicitly mentioned, for example, with the Common Agricultural Policy for monitoring the practices that are implemented at the different scales. And I think a key part of really using Earth observation to its full potential is the scale and also the level of possibility of harmonization and exploring the potential. So I would like to mention, for example, a very nice initiative from FAO, that is the Global Soil Organic Carbon Sequestration Potential Map. So it's really like a combination of Earth observation, climate data, modeling that is mapping, in that case, at a high, low resolution. So we need, of course, especially in Europe, to go to a much finer scale. So here is where advanced technology comes into play, so also higher resolution data. But this allows to identify hotspots that have the best potential for improvement. And this also kind of goes together with the policy and the baseline concept, which I think is extremely relevant. And I understand there is still a lot of discussion on how to define these baselines in a fair way, so that farmers that have been already implementing regenerative agricultural practices are already doing well in terms of carbon sequestration, are not left behind from the potential incentives. So paradoxically, their soil organic carbon sequestration potential will be lower because they are already at a higher level. So using Earth observation can help mapping those usage, those areas, and I think there is a lot of cross work that can be done at the policy and standards and companies level.
Thank you very much. I think it's really important to talk about how these different methodologies really work together, because when you talk to people about any specific individual method or practice, you'll hear about the shortcomings, right? Because I didn't pretend to be an Earth observation specialist. I didn't want to create that impression. I hope that wasn't the case. But when I talk to people about it, I hear often, for example, the limitations when you talk about soil carbon, which is still quite tricky to map and to measure. Earth observation, in my understanding, it can look at the topsoil, at the carbon in the layer, maybe was it 30 centimeters, something like that. If you go below that, a lot is happening there in terms of soil carbon. You need to have a full picture of that as well to be able to really, with some kind of reliability and robustness, being able to say this is what we are doing on the land is impacting in terms of soil carbon. So I think it's clear already from all of your replies that the one only Earth observation will not be able to give us the full picture. It will always need to be in combination with other.
Absolutely, and also I want to bring up the point that we are talking about biological processes, and there is a lot of errors just coming from the biology. So when we are talking about assessing the sensitivity that we want to reach, we also have to take into consideration that even the ground truth data come with an inherent error. So we cannot imagine Earth observation to do better than ground truth data analysis.
David, you want to add in maybe something on the standards that Vera develops? How do they take into considerations, maybe the limitations of each method in separation? How do you bring them together to have a robust methodology?
Well, this is a ongoing development, and at Vera we are really supporting Earth observation for many reasons. This is asked by our project developers that they would rather use a good map than do soil measurement themselves. And for us also, if we would have a good, if we have a good map, or if we would have a good map, that would be way more transparent than rely on the measurements of the project developers and do the validation and verification of those measurements separately. But we have a certain percentage, so we have to be 10% within 10% of error, and so far we still need on-site measurements for most of our projects. So that's why I mentioned the baseline monitoring, because it's easier. But I've seen LiDAR projects that were very impressive today. I was working on LiDAR myself, so that's if you can reach LiDAR imaging that you can actually measure, for instance, trees separately, then that would be amazing. And I see that coming, and once we will be there, then that's definitely that we are going to use it broadly.
Thank you. Christian, with the data that we have in Europe today, to which extent do you feel that we have what we need to implement, a system that is proposed under CRCF, and potentially where are the gaps? And Antonella can prepare, because my next question would be, what are companies in the field doing to prepare to jump into those gaps, if there are any?
Maybe first?
Yeah. Sure.
I would also like to say something about the data themselves, because the topic of AI came up before, and an AI is only as good as the data that it is fed with. And we have a huge problem of harmonization data and access to data when we talk about soil data, and that are in the end, it's not people, but they are linked to people, and there are data collected, generated by European funded projects, European initiatives that cannot be shared because of privacy concerns. I mean, in the end, we are talking about Earth observation. By default, they are geolocated, so you cannot really anonymize those kind of data. So harmonization is one thing, access is another thing, and in terms of what we are waiting for is, I would say, it's really like data that are usable. So again, it came up in the previous session about platforms with data ready to use, because in the end, the data cleaning, the data quality itself, it's really crucial, and often the time you are just reinventing the wheel every time, because you always have to start from scratch with the data that you get. In terms of innovation, there are even like companies that are focusing on cleaning data. So a typical example is cloudiness, and you have just a read per week of your data, and if you have more clouds than you expect that make your data not usable, then all of a sudden you don't have the needed input for your model. So these are crucial little things related to data quality and accessibility.
Maybe the question then has changed a little bit, because the question originally was for you, what kind of data do we already have and where are the gaps? But maybe a dimension that we can add now based on what we just heard is, what is maybe the EU, the Commission, from a policy and regulation point of view, doing to work on this harmonization and interoperability that we hear a lot about?
Yeah, not bad. As I said, this is what we want to do with the carbon removal certification, with the forest monitoring law, with the soil monitoring law, and then also to create the data hub with the European Environment Agency in Copenhagen. And of course, everything in terms of harmonization, accessibility, this is something where we can do things in Brussels. It's not our job to reinvent the methodologies. But everything we can do there, and also taking up your experiences with the data access and so on. I hope we can drive that forward. So, for example, we have like under the new call for the soil mission projects, we have one project is, okay, how could you then integrate the data that we get from the individual certification into the national inventories? Because as I said, we would have that vision that we can move more to the individual plot data, and from that then build up the inventory. So how do we get those data sets together? Because of course there will be a certain bias, the ones who will apply for certification. But how can we deal with that? So for example, that's something where we have a project out, and I think even like one is 11 million. Yeah, so these are things we are really interested in to work together. And I think what we are looking for is to start with something robust. It's not that we are soil scientists that need to go to new frontiers in how exact you can measure that. In any case, the soil carbon is a limited carbon storage. So as I said before, what is from a climate perspective very interesting is also agroforestry. Afforestation is the above ground biomass, where like in terms of the measurement, of course, it's a bit easier, as I understand, than the soil carbon. And I'm always impressed. I talked to a guy, I think it was from one of these agricultural machineries, and he said, okay, we managed to deplete our soils over the last decades, so we should be able to reverse that and to put the carbon back in. And I think this is what you need for policy making, that it goes into the right direction, that we give the right incentives for the farmers to move towards that, and that must be robust. So, like wherever it is, whether it's 30 centimeters, 70 centimeters, 1.5 meters, and so on. As I said, we don't want to go into new scientific depths there, but we need one indicator that really shows, okay, if the farmer is applying these new methodologies, this goes into the right direction, and then we can deal with the data, with the uncertainties, and calculate it.
Thank you. David, you mentioned Verra is the largest standard organization. I have a hard time imagining that you are, as a company, as an organization, passive towards all the development in MRV technology and so on, and then just adjust your standards based on what is happening. I would assume you also have a role of interaction with the industry in maybe shaping what is being developed. So I'll be interested, I think maybe a lot of people in the room also would be interested in hearing how Verra interacts with these industries and maybe co-develops certain solutions.
Yes, in short. So Verra is engaging with multiple stakeholders. We have direct interactions with service providers, so that helps us to understand how we can improve our methodologies. We are even working on creating a forest map for 40 countries globally. That will create a baseline, again, I'm using the word, but so baseline, where is a forest? So you can do a reforestation project where there is no forest. So create a forest map of almost globally. And we're working, and another, I just had also a meeting here that we are directly engaging with a participant at the conference to develop our observation technology. I would rather say it's not a methodology. For each methodology, we have methodology tools that can be used, and we constantly update those as well. And the other one is that the project developers, and that's probably the most important one, the project developers themselves investigate what is there, what is the best solution for them. They are always, of course, going to reduce cost, to be able to make projects in certain areas where it would be very hard to do actual measurements on food. And then they communicate with us, communicate with Verra. Do we agree? Is it something that can work? And we generally support satellite observation, for instance. for the reason that it's way more transparent than someone doing the measurement. Maybe it's not that precise, but for a first-party verification, it's way easier.
Thank you. Christian, picking up on something you just mentioned in terms of incentives, because I work on agriculture and climate, so when I look at the CRCF, I look at it from an angle, what is going to be the benefit for the climate, and how is it going to reshape our agricultural system, which needs urgent reshaping. And so from always looking at that, like through that lens, I rarely actually stop and think, what's in it for the Earth observation industry? Where is the incentive for them to develop their methodologies and their technologies to better assist in the implementation of this framework? Because I think most of the discussions are around how do we make sure that the incentives are right for the land managers to change their practices, and incentives for the whole industry supporting this transition, I would say, is maybe less an area of attention, at least for me. So I was wondering if you have any views on that.
No, I think, as I said again, with this certification, soil monitoring, forest monitoring law, we want to create one European harmonized market for Earth observation or other types of monitoring. And I think these were the key points that you said. Harmonization, accessibility. So, and I think with these three legislative proposals, acts, together we want to create that framework, or take a step towards that. And of course, then comes the integration with all the CAP data that we have. And of course, as I've also said before, this should all also provide a service then to the food industry or to the wood processing, biomass processing industry, because they are all struggling with documenting and reducing their Scope 3 emissions. Oh? And it's there where they want them to show to their investors, to their consumers, okay, I have a climate neutral value chain, or maybe even a climate positive value chain. And this is where the market then is. It's about these claims, which is currently a voluntary market. But like this is something that we are now looking into when going forward in our post-2030 climate policies, whether there a more regulated emission and removal trading system could help in the way as we have it also in other industries, or almost in all other sectors than agriculture. And we have to deal with the specificities there, that it's a lot about the Scope 3 emissions, so the emissions from producing the food on the ground. And you have so many farmers, I think 11 million in Europe. And how do you find an efficient system to monitor those and to give the right incentives? And I think this is the market that we are trying to build. And I think we can only do, and one of the key success factors for that is that we have a robust, reliable, and cost-efficient monitoring methodology.
All right, so is that how we should envision the use of, because we're talking basically about an MRV system, right? And so this will generate certified units, CRCF stamp on a carbon removal, a ton of carbon removal, for example. Is that how we should see the use of those certificates? Because there's been a lot of discussion around what will we then do with those certificates? So yeah. Scope 3 emissions for agri-food businesses? Or?
I mean, there are two options how you can finance it. You can finance it through the public budget, through the common agricultural policy. There will be a discussion very soon. The Commission has to come next year with the proposal for the next multi-annual financial framework, including the CAP. The other option is you finance it within the value chain. So, but I think irrespective of, or it will be a combination of both. But I think where there is, I would say kind of really a basic agreement that we need to go more towards an outcome result-based system, that farmers are rewarded for what also they deliver in terms of ecosystem services. So in terms of the outcomes and not only the practices that they are adopting, so that we can also really here have a switch and empower farmers, that it's really for them to change the practices, but for them to take this choice, they need a lot of advice, and of course, they need the good data.
Thank you. Yeah, because the CAP has been very practice-focused, and so the idea is that here we move to a more result-based kind of incentive system.
But I think the CEP is also going in that direction.
Yep, let's see where it goes with the next reform. Antonella, from your point of view, your company, also your sector more in general, do you, when you hear about the CRCF, you've been following the process as well, I've understood. Do you see this already generating new opportunities for the sector?
Absolutely, because it's it was mentioned. So right now, all these carbon emissions, carbon neutrality is completely on a voluntary basis, which means that there is no big willing to adopt those practices. When we talk about farmers, they have just too many risks with respect to the potential benefits, so they will not adopt the solutions that we are trying to bring to the market. So the carbon removal certification framework is very much needed action for climate, and it's opening up a lot of opportunities in general that are going to support the decarbonization of the supply chain and more implementations of regenerative agricultural practices, because it's also very relevant to stress that the farmers sometimes they don't adopt regenerative agriculture because they don't care about climate. Sometimes they're just the margins are so low, and they cannot afford the risk to change something in the system that might lead to reduce a yield. Climate is changing, so I come originally from Italy, and now you can grow avocados in Sicily, so things have to change. There are knowledge gaps, so in terms of like recommending farmers what to do, yes, they know better, but at the same time there is some knowledge, scientific knowledge that can be transferred for the changing conditions that we are facing.
Thank you very much, David. Your company has been looking at certification of carbon removals for a very long time. I'm not sure when it started, but it feels like ages.
17 years ago.
Yeah, so that's quite some experience there. So when you look at the CRCF, which is a kind of brand new initiative, let's say, a new framework, does it look to you as a game changer? Does it change how removals will be carried out and certified, or is it kind of business as usual for an organization like Verra?
This is a very good question. So in Europe, it's definitely going to change how removal projects will be developed. We are a global organization, so for us, what we see with CRCF is how can we make sure that our project developers who are doing projects now with Verra can later on stay with us, but also use CRCF as well. And the other one that we really look into the CRCF, that is it going to be some standard setting globally? So will it have an impact on global projects? And what I really like with the communication with the Commission is that it seems very transparent and very open. And I really hope that over the course of this year, the methodologies and the steps that the CRCF is going to take until 2030 will be encouraging for Verra, will be encouraging for project developers, and mainly and most importantly for the climate.
Thank you very much. That's, I think, a nice closing statement. I had a quick look at the screen here, and I see many of the challenges that are being identified in the room and maybe online as well are many of the things that we've talked about. So I think the conversation was definitely touching on some relevant issues. We see accuracy, we see the depth that EO can measure in the soil. Uncertainty, need for clear certification. Working on that, I would say, work in progress. I think there were some questions as well. If we can move to the questions, see if there's something that's on the is carbon farming a global or national market? Maybe, Christian, you want to mention the current scope of the CRCF?
Yes, the current scope is for projects in Europe, because we want to have a full handle on whatever happens there. But of course, the value chains in the agri-food sector are global, and at a certain point there will be a discussion then also how does a European value chain compare to a value chain with third countries.
Thank you. And then I see we have an invitation for everyone on the second place. Third is an interesting question that I think is very heavily debated. We've touched upon it as well. Is for Earth observation, it's easier to monitor or to identify practices that are being implemented than results. But I think the direction in which we're traveling is kind of the opposite direction, right? We're trying to...
Yeah, but I think this is now for our first methodology really the key question. How do we combine remote sensing, in situ monitoring and modeling in the best and most robust way? Yeah? And this is where we would expect your input on what can be done best, what is currently, for the next 5 years, the best combination that we can get there. Any
other comments?
I want to comment on the focus from certifying the parameters like soil carbon to the activities. I don't see it possible in the sense that, no-till is accepted as good for everyone, but in general, there is no one solution fits all. So using the same cover crop on different soils might have a very different result. So you cannot just consider the single practice. And even no-till on heavily tilled soil, you cannot go directly to no-till. You have to do reduced till first. So in the end, the only way that you can be fair is to have this kind of baselines based on parameters, soil carbon, some related to ecosystem benefits that can be biodiversity or other, so that you can, in the end, understand if that practice is the right one for that specific farm, that specific soil, that specific pedoclimatic condition.
Yeah. So what you're saying is actually monitoring practices is not a very good proxy for knowing what exactly a certain practice is doing in a specific place.
It could be like a first level, like, okay, let's see that the farmer declares no-till and is actually doing no-till. But then in terms of like the additivity, how do you check additivity if the farmer is doing no-till every year? It doesn't add anything. So it's, I think it's not possible, and it's not also not fair to just look at the single practice.
Thank you very much. I've been asked to stick to the time, so I'll be a good moderator and disappoint the audience. But I'm sure if you have further questions, then our speakers will be available for your questions afterwards. Thank you very much. Please give a round of applause for our speakers.